My name is Garrett Willis. I am 64 years old and I have been retired for the past 3 years. I worked as an auto parts sales manager at Florida Auto Parts for 37 years, but the company eventually went bankrupt due to competition from Chinese manufacturers. I started out as a salesman, but gradually worked my way up to regional manager. The job was stressful. I had to constantly chase orders, persuade customers, and keep track of inventory. But the pay was good, especially in the good years. I live with my wife Constance in a small house in the suburbs of Tampa, which I bought back in 1994 when prices were reasonable. It's a one-story house with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a small yard with a lawn. Nothing special, but it's ours. Constance worked as a nurse at the city hospital until she retired 2 years ago. We got married 40 years ago, when I was 24 and she was 21. We met at a dance at a local club. She was a beauty back then, slender, with chestnut hair and lively green eyes. She's still beautiful, although the years have taken their toll, of course. We have 2 children. Our son Dexter, who is 30 and works as a refrigeration repair technician, and our daughter Juliet, who is 26 and works as an administrator at Tampa Insurance Group. They both live separately, which is appropriate for their age. Dexter rents an apartment in the city center, not far from work. He's an independent guy and hasn't asked for money since he got a job after college. Juliet lives in a small apartment in the north of the city, also renting, but I have to help her out from time to time. Her car breaks down, or she has other unexpected expenses. My pension is small, about $2,000 a month, plus Constance gets $1,200. But I have savings. I've always been careful with money and put aside a percentage of every paycheck. Over the years, I've accumulated about $120,000. I keep it in a bank deposit and in conservative funds. This money should be enough for a comfortable retirement unless, of course, something unexpected happens. That Sunday in March began as usual. I woke up at 6:30, a habit from my working years. Constance got up a little later and immediately set about her household chores. By breakfast, she had already made a plan for the day: clean the house, go to the store, and cook dinner for the family. We started this tradition when the children were little. Every second Sunday of the month, we all get together. When they were children, Dexter and Juliet weren't very happy about these mandatory gatherings, but now that they are adults and live separately, these dinners have become important for maintaining family ties. In the morning, I went to the hardware store for paint. I decided to touch up the fence in front of the house. The sun is scorching in Florida, and paint fades quickly. While I was choosing the right shade, I ran into my neighbor Bob Harrison. He told me that his son was in trouble again. He had been arrested for drunk driving. Bob looked exhausted. It's hard when your adult children cause problems. When I got home, I found Constance in the kitchen preparing dinner. She decided to make roast chicken with mashed potatoes and green beans, the children's favorite. She also baked an apple pie using her mother's recipe. The kitchen was filled with delicious aromas, and I realized I was really hungry. "Dexter will be home at 4, my wife said, stirring the sauce. And Juliet said she might be late. She's bringing someone with her." "Who?" "She didn't say. She just asked me to set the table for one more person." Over the past couple of years, my daughter had brought young men home for family dinners several times. They were usually nice guys from her circle of friends, co-workers, or friends of friends. But for some reason, Juliet's relationships never lasted long. She's a complicated girl, beautiful, smart, but with a strong personality. Maybe she's too demanding of men, or maybe she's just unlucky. Juliet took after her mother in appearance. The same green eyes and brown hair, tall and slender. She always had many admirers in school, but she never had a serious relationship. In college, she dated one guy for almost 2 years, and we thought they would get married, but they broke up. After that, she dated a few guys, but nothing lasted. Dexter came along first, as always. My son is the complete opposite of his sister. She is emotional and impulsive, while he is calm and level-headed. Dexter is never late, always keeps his word, and doesn't like small talk. He works for Commercial Cold Repair, which services restaurants and grocery stores throughout Tampa. He drives around town in a company van, repairing refrigerators, freezers, and ice makers. It's not a prestigious job, but it's stable, and Dexter never complained. "How's work?" I asked while we waited for Juliet. "Fine. Lots of calls lately. I guess the equipment is getting old and breaking down more often." Dexter told me about a complicated repair job at a large restaurant where he had to replace the compressor in an industrial refrigerator. The job took all day, but the customer was satisfied. "My son knows more about technology than many engineers. He has golden hands and patience." Juliet arrived half an hour late. That was typical of her. My daughter always thought the world should wait for her. Even as a child, she could make the whole family wait for her to get ready for school or to go out. But this time she was especially excited, simply glowing with happiness. Standing next to her was a tall guy in his late 20s, wearing an expensive blue shirt and dark pants. A gold chain glinted around his neck and a massive watch hung from his wrist. "Meet Bradley Coleman," Juliet announced as she crossed the threshold. Her voice was excited, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Bradley, this is my parents, Garrett and Constance, and this is my brother Dexter." Bradley shook my hand firmly. His grip was confident, but not too strong. He looked me straight in the eye, smiled with his white teeth, and immediately began showering me with compliments. "Mr. Willis, you have a really beautiful home, and what a wonderful aroma is coming from the kitchen. Juliet told me that Mrs. Willis is an excellent cook, but I couldn't imagine it would be this good." Constance immediately blushed with pleasure. My wife always loved being complimented on her cooking, and Bradley clearly understood this from the very first moment. He approached her, kissed her hand gallantly, and said he felt like he was at the best restaurant in town. "What a well-mannered young man," Constance whispered to me as we walked to the table. During dinner, I began to ask our guest questions. First, I asked about his work. For a man, that's always the main question. "I work at Tampa Prime Auto," Bradley said, carefully cutting his chicken. "I sell used cars. But to be honest, it's just a temporary job. I have much more serious plans for the future." "What kind of plans?" asked Dexter, without looking up from his plate. "I want to start my own business, maybe even a chain of car dealerships. The used car market in our state is very promising. People don't want to overpay for new cars, especially now that the economy is unstable. And I know how to find good deals. I know where to look for quality cars at reasonable prices." Bradley spoke with such confidence that he was almost convincing. He talked about trends in the car market, which brands were in demand, which models held their value better. He seemed to really know his stuff. "Where are you going to get the money to open the dealership?" Dexter continued to ask. "I've been saving up for several years. Plus I have potential investors who are willing to put money into a promising project. A friend of mine has already opened a similar business in Orlando, and it's very successful. The main thing is to present the idea correctly and show a business plan." Juliet looked at him adoringly, hanging on his every word. It was clear that she was completely under the spell of this guy. From time to time, she touched his hand, adjusted his napkin, and fed him. The infatuation was written all over her face. "Tell them about your car," she nudged Bradley. "Oh yes," he perked up. "I recently bought a BMW 3 Series model year 2020. It's used, of course, but in excellent condition. One owner, full service history, only 30,000 miles on it. I had to take out a loan, but now I drive in comfort. In my line of work, image is very important. Clients need to see that you know your cars and can afford a quality vehicle." I glanced at Dexter. My son raised his eyebrows slightly, a gesture that in our family meant skepticism. A 2020 BMW, even used, cost a lot. $35,000, maybe more. It was strange to hear that a salesman from a used car lot could afford it. Bradley went to business college, added Juliet. He has a degree in sales management. Yes, I studied theory for 2 years and now I'm putting it into practice, confirmed Bradley. Although, to be honest, real life is very different from the textbooks. Everything is simple and logical in theory, but in practice you have to take a lot of nuances into account. Constance asked about his family. Bradley said that his parents lived here in Tampa, in the West Chase neighborhood. His father had worked as a construction foreman for many years and was now retired. His mother had been a housewife all her life, raising the children. He has a younger sister who is studying nursing at a local college. They're simple, hard-working people, he said. Nothing special, but they taught me to value family and hard work. After the main course, Constance served apple pie with vanilla ice cream. Bradley savored every bite, saying he had never eaten anything so delicious. My wife was melting from the compliments. Dad, show Bradley your workshop in the garage, suggested Juliet. He's good with mechanics, too. After dinner, we did indeed go to the garage. I have a small workshop there, a workbench, a set of tools, spare parts left over from my previous job. It's my hobby in retirement. I repair lawnmowers and small appliances for my neighbors and service my car. It's a useful and enjoyable activity. It keeps my hands busy. Impressive, Bradley said, looking at my tools. You have almost a professional workshop here. Everything is very neat and organized. He picked up a torque wrench, turned it, and checked the settings. It was clear that he was familiar with the tools. I have a garage at home too, but I haven't set it up properly yet, he continued. I never have enough time. I work late and I often have to drive to customers on weekends. Dexter walked silently beside him, studying the contents of the shelves. I know my son, he was thinking, analyzing. He had a habit of weighing everything up first and then drawing conclusions. Bradley, he said suddenly, how many cars do you usually sell in a month? It varies. In a good month, 15 to 20. In a bad month, maybe 5 to 7. It depends on the season, what cars are available, and the overall economic situation. And what percentage do you get from the sale? It depends on the cost of the car. The percentage is lower for cheaper cars and higher for more expensive ones. On average, it's about $300 to $500 per sale. Dexter nodded, but I could see him quickly calculating the figures in his head. My son isn't very talkative, but he's great at math. Math was his favorite subject in school. We returned to the house and settled in the living room. Constance brought coffee and served the rest of the pie. Juliet was beaming as she snuggled up to Bradley on the sofa. They looked like a beautiful couple. He tall and handsome, she graceful and elegant. Mr. Willis, Bradley said suddenly, turning to me, I'd like to talk to you about my intentions toward Juliet. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be that serious? My daughter blushed and lowered her eyes. I realize we haven't known each other long, but sometimes feelings don't depend on time. Juliet is an amazing girl, and I want you to know that my intentions are absolutely serious. Then he suddenly stood up from the sofa, knelt down in front of Juliet, and took a small velvet box from his jacket's inside pocket. Juliet, I had planned to do this in a romantic setting, perhaps in a restaurant or on the beach. But then I realized that there's no better place than your family home. This is where you grew up. This is where the people who love you are. Marry me. He opened the box, and a ring with a small but very beautiful diamond sparkled inside. Juliet gasped, covered her mouth with her hands, and her eyes filled with tears. She stared at the ring for a few seconds, unable to say a word. Yes, she finally breathed. Of course, yes. 1,000 times yes. She threw herself into Bradley's arms and he spun her around the living room. Constance clapped her hands and immediately rushed to hug her daughter. The house was in an uproar. Everyone was talking at once, congratulating them, looking at the ring. I stood aside, watching the scene in confusion. It all happened so suddenly that I didn't have time to collect my thoughts. Dexter was silent too, sitting in his chair with a stony face. "Congratulations," I finally said when the initial emotions had subsided a little. "I hope you'll be happy together." What else could I say? My daughter was a grown woman and had the right to make her own choices, but inside, I felt a knot of anxiety. Something about Bradley made me wary, although I couldn't put my finger on it. "When's the wedding?" Constance asked, admiring the ring on her daughter's finger. "We haven't discussed the details yet," Bradley replied, "but we'd like to get it done soon. Maybe this summer?" "Summer? But that's so soon!" exclaimed Constance. "Mom, when people love each other, why wait?" said Juliet, beaming with happiness. They stayed with us for another hour, discussing plans and sharing their joy. Bradley talked about where they could live after the wedding and what kind of apartment to rent. Juliet dreamed aloud about her wedding dress and honeymoon. Finally, they got ready to leave. We walked them to their car. Bradley's BMW really looked impressive. Dark blue metallic, leather interior, everything you'd expect in a car of that class. "Thanks for a wonderful evening," Bradley said, shaking my hand again. "I hope we'll be a real family." The BMW's engine roared pleasantly, and they drove away, leaving the three of us on the porch. "What a nice guy," said Constance, waving at the receding car. "Well-mannered, polite, clearly loves our Juliet." Dexter grunted and headed for his car. "Dex, what's wrong?" his mother called after him. He stopped and turned to us. "Nothing much. Just wondering how he's going to support a family." According to my calculations, even if he sells 20 cars a month and gets $400 each, that's $8,000. Minus taxes, that leaves about $6,000. Minus the payment on his BMW loan, at least $1,500 a month. Minus rent, food, clothes, gas. What's left for family life? "Maybe he makes more," Constance said uncertainly. "Maybe," Dexter agreed. "Or maybe a lot less. Do you know how much a ring with a diamond like that costs? At least $3,000. Where does a used car salesman get that kind of money?" He got into his beat-up Honda and drove away, leaving Constance and me on the porch. My wife was excited and happy. Finally, our daughter was getting married. We would have grandchildren. The family would grow. But I felt uneasy. Everything had gone too smoothly with this Bradley. We went into the house and started clearing the table. Constance talked nonstop about the wedding, making plans, dreaming about future grandchildren. I silently washed the dishes and thought about how, in 37 years of working with people, I had learned a thing or two about human nature. And something told me that this handsome guy with a snow-white smile and an expensive ring would bring our family more trouble than joy. The next day, I woke up with a heavy feeling. I tossed and turned all night thinking about the previous evening. Constance slept peacefully, even smiling in her sleep, probably dreaming about wedding preparations and future grandchildren. But my head was spinning with the figures Dexter had quoted and the alarming details of Bradley's behavior. After breakfast, I decided to walk over to my best friend Chester McDonald's house. He lives 3 blocks away from us, in a similar one-story house. Chester is 2 years older than me, has been a mailman for 35 years, and knows everyone in the neighborhood. We've been friends for over 20 years, ever since he moved to our neighborhood. We go fishing together, play dominoes in the evenings, and discuss the news and life's problems. I found Chester in his garage repairing his old lawnmower. His hands are still nimble, although his back isn't what it used to be. "Hi, Garrett," he said, without looking up from his work. "How was family dinner?" "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Chester put down his tools and looked at me intently. "What's wrong?" I could see from his face that something was wrong. I told him about Bradley, about the sudden proposal, about my doubts. Chester listened silently, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he scratched his gray beard thoughtfully. I understand your concerns, he said finally. But you know, Garrett, maybe you're just worried as a father. Your daughter is an adult. She has the right to choose. And this guy might really love her. Chester, you know I'm not the kind of father who clings to his daughters, but there's something about him. It's all too perfect, too smooth. What exactly makes you suspicious? Money. How does a used car salesman afford a BMW and an expensive ring? And he talks too much about his plans and too little about his actual achievements. Chester nodded. Maybe you're right, but what are you going to do about it? Forbid your daughter to marry him? She won't listen to you, and it will ruin your relationship. I don't know. I'd like to talk to her alone without Bradley. Maybe she'll tell me something. Try it, but be careful. Women in love don't like it when you criticize their partners. We talked about other things for a while, then I went home. Constance was on the phone with a friend, excitedly discussing yesterday's events. Hearing my footsteps, she covered the receiver with her hand. It's Mary Johnson, remember her? I'm telling her about Juliet's engagement. I nodded and went into my workshop. I needed something to occupy my hands and my mind. In the afternoon, Juliet called. She sounded excited and happy. Dad, can I come over tonight? I want to talk about the wedding. Sure, come over. Will you be having dinner? No, thanks. Bradley is coming later. We're going to meet his parents. Juliet arrived around 7 in the evening. She looked gorgeous. A new dress, her hair carefully styled, an engagement ring glistening on her finger. Happiness literally shone in her eyes. Mom, Dad, I'm so happy, she said as soon as she entered the house. You have no idea how wonderful Bradley is. We spent the whole day planning the wedding. Constance immediately joined the discussion. They sat down at the kitchen table, took out a notebook, and began making lists. Guests, flowers, music, photographer. I listened with half an ear, waiting for the right moment to talk to my daughter alone. When exactly is the wedding? Constance asked. June 23rd. It's a Saturday. Bradley wants everything to be beautiful and festive. But that's in 3 months. That's not enough time to prepare. Mom, we don't want to wait. Besides, summer weddings are the most beautiful. They discussed the details for another half hour. Finally, Constance went to the kitchen to make tea and I had a chance to talk to my daughter. Juliet, I began cautiously, are you sure you know Bradley well? You haven't been dating that long. My daughter's face immediately became wary. Dad, what are you getting at? Nothing. I just want to make sure you're happy. Bradley seems like a nice guy, but what? Juliet's voice became sharp. You don't like him, do you? It's not about liking him or not. I just want to understand how you plan to live, how you're going to support a family, where you're going to live. Dad, I'm 26 years old. I'm a grown woman and I can figure out my own relationships. Of course you can, but I have a right to worry about you. Juliet got up from the table and began pacing the room. You know what I think? You just can't accept that I've grown up. You can't let me go. And that's why you find faults in every man I like. That's not true. It is. Remember Michael? You criticized him for being too young and not serious. Then there was David. You complained that he didn't make enough money. Now it's Bradley. And again, something's not right. I tried to argue, but my daughter wouldn't listen. Bradley is the best man I've ever met. He's smart, ambitious, caring. He loves me and wants to start a family. But that's not enough for you, is it? You have to find faults in him. At that moment, Constance returned with the tray. Seeing her agitated daughter, she became alarmed. What's going on? Mom, Dad is starting his questions about Bradley again. I'm tired of it. Constance looked at me reproachfully. I spread my arms. The conversation wasn't going as I had planned. Juliet, sweetheart, your father is just worried about you. Constance tried to calm her daughter down. It's normal. No, Mom, it's not normal. It's an attempt to control my life. My daughter grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Juliet, wait. I tried to stop her. No, Dad. I thought I could share my happiness with you. But instead of support, I get interrogation and suspicion. She slammed the door and drove away. Constance looked at me disapprovingly. Why did you do that, Garrett? I just wanted to talk to her. Talk? You upset her. She's happy and you're trying to ruin everything. I went to the garage to avoid continuing the conversation. I knew I had acted awkwardly, but I couldn't stop worrying about my daughter. The following week, preparations for the wedding began in earnest. Juliet called her mother every day to discuss the details. After our conversation, she was deliberately cold toward me, answering in monosyllables and avoiding direct communication. On Wednesday, she came with specific requests. Mom, Dad, we need your help with the wedding expenses, she said, sitting in the living room next to her mother. Of course, honey, Constance replied immediately. How much do you need? A banquet for 50 people will cost $8,000. It's a nice restaurant, all-inclusive, food, drinks, music. I almost choked on my coffee. $8,000 for one party. And the wedding dress is another $1,500, Juliet continued. I found a stunning dress at Bridal Elegance. Juliet, I interrupted, that's a lot of money. Dad, you only get married once. I want everything to be beautiful. But $9,500. Garrett, Constance stopped me. We can afford it. Technically, she was right. We had savings and $9,000 wouldn't break us. But spending that much on a single event seemed wasteful to me. What are Bradley's parents paying? I asked. Juliet frowned. They're helping out as much as they can. They're paying for the flowers and the photographer. And how much is that? Dad, what does that have to do with anything? Every family contributes what they can. Constance had already taken out her checkbook. Don't worry, honey, we'll pay for the banquet and the dress. On Saturday, we met with Bradley's parents. We agreed to meet at our house for lunch. Constance spent the whole day preparing, wanting to make a good impression on her future in-laws. Bradley's parents arrived in an old Ford that had clearly seen better days. His father, Roy Coleman, was a short, thin man in his 60s with a reddish face and nervous mannerisms. His mother, Dorothy, was a heavy woman with a tired expression and cheap clothes. It's very nice to meet you, Dorothy said, timidly shaking my hand. Bradley has told us so much about your family. Roy nodded silently, avoiding direct eye contact. He smelled faintly of alcohol, even though it was only 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The conversation was awkward during lunch. Constance tried her best to keep the conversation going, asking about work and retirement plans. Roy answered reluctantly, mostly remaining silent. Dorothy was more talkative, but she complained the whole time. Things are hard for us right now, she sighed. Roy hasn't worked in 3 years and his back is killing him. And our pension is so small, we can barely afford medicine. Constance nodded sympathetically and offered to help. I felt uncomfortable, not because of their poverty, but because of how openly they talked about it on our first meeting. You have a big house, Dorothy continued, looking around our living room. It must be expensive to maintain. It's all right, we manage, I replied. We rent a small apartment in Westchester, she admitted. We wanted to buy a house, but we couldn't save up for the down payment. Bradley and Juliet sat next to each other, holding hands. It was clear that Bradley was shy around his parents, and Juliet was trying her best to look friendly. Dorothy, are you helping with the wedding planning? Asked Constance. Of course. We're paying for the flowers, the bridal bouquet, and the groomsman's boutonniere anyway. The rest will be whatever we can find. We'll take care of the photographer too, Roy added, speaking for the first time during the meal. I know a guy who doesn't charge much. Constance leaned over to me and whispered, I feel awkward. They're obviously expecting us to pay for everything. After lunch, when the guests had left, my wife and I stayed behind to clear the table. What a family, said Constance, stacking the dirty dishes. Poor people, of course, but But what? I don't know. There's something wrong with them, especially Mr. Bradley, and his mother talked about money all the time. See, I'm not the only one who's suspicious. Garrett, maybe they're just embarrassed about their situation. Their son is marrying a girl from a wealthier family, so they feel inferior. Perhaps Constance was right, but I still had an uneasy feeling. I also noticed how Roy Coleman looked at our house intently, as if he were evaluating it, and how Dorothy asked about our income, our pension, our savings. Dexter called that evening. "Dad, how did the meeting with your fiancé's parents go?" "Not very well. They seem like nice people, but they're poor, and they're not shy about talking about it." "I see. How's Juliet?" "She's trying to be nice to everyone, but you can tell she's nervous." Dexter paused. "You know, Dad, I did some background checks on Bradley." "What kind of checks?" "I have a friend who works at a car dealership across the street from Tampa Prime Auto. He says Bradley isn't very well liked there. He doesn't sell much and customers complain about him. Plus, he recently took a vacation at his own expense." My heart sank. So my suspicions weren't unfounded. "Dex, what should we do?" "I don't know, Dad. Nothing for now, but let's keep our ears open." A month before the wedding, life in our house was a whirlwind of activity. Constance was busy with wedding preparations from morning till night, calling suppliers, finalizing details for the reception, discussing the last touches of the ceremony with Juliet. I kept my distance from the commotion, but I could feel the tension building. Juliet started coming over almost every day. Outwardly, she looked happy, but I noticed signs of fatigue, dark circles under her eyes, nervous gestures, irritability over trifles. The wedding preparations were clearly not easy for her. Bradley appeared less often. He said he was working a lot, preparing for the honeymoon and dealing with some business matters. When he did come home, he was a little more reserved than before, with fewer compliments and less obvious enthusiasm. Maybe he was just tired from all the pre-wedding preparations, or maybe he sensed my coldness. During those days, I thought a lot about my conversation with Dexter and what he had told me about Bradley's job. I wanted to believe that my son was wrong, that all my suspicions were unfounded. But a voice inside me told me that something was wrong. One Wednesday evening, with exactly 4 weeks to go before the wedding, Juliet arrived at our house looking visibly upset. She didn't wait for dinner, but went straight into the living room and sat down opposite Constance and me. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you," she began, nervously fiddling with the strap of her purse. "What's wrong, honey?" Constance asked, alarmed. "Nothing bad. We just have some extra expenses for the wedding." I was on my guard. We've already spent almost $10,000. The reception, the dress, the shoes, the jewelry for the bride, my suit, gifts for the bridesmaids. What other expenses could there be? "Bradley booked our honeymoon in the Bahamas," Juliet continued, avoiding our gaze. "A week in a 5-star hotel, all-inclusive. It'll be unforgettable." "That's wonderful," said Constance. "The Bahamas is a great place for a honeymoon." "Yes, but there's one problem. The reservation has to be confirmed and paid for by the end of this week, and we don't have the money yet." I felt myself tense up, so now she was going to ask us for financial help. "How much does this honeymoon cost?" I asked. Juliet hesitated, then said quietly, $8,000. Constance gasped. I leaned back in my chair, unable to believe what I was hearing. $8,000 for a week's vacation? I asked. "Dad, it's a very nice hotel. The Bahamas Reef Resort, 5 stars. It has a spa, restaurants, a private beach, water sports. Everything is included in the price." "Juliet, that's a lot of money," Constance interjected. "Maybe we can find something cheaper." "Mom, you only get one honeymoon. We want it to be special, unforgettable. Bradley says I deserve the best." I got up from my chair and paced around the room. $8,000 a week at a resort was comparable to our annual entertainment and vacation budget. Where is Bradley going to get the money? I asked. Why can't he pay for his bride's honeymoon? Juliet's face hardened. He's got all his money tied up in his business. He's getting ready to open his own salon and is in talks with investors. All his funds are frozen. I see. And that's why he's coming to us again. Dad, don't say that. Bradley isn't asking you for help. I am. Juliet, we've already spent almost $10,000 on your wedding, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. That's a lot of money for our budget. But you have savings. You said yourself that you've been putting money aside for years. Those savings are for our retirement, for unexpected expenses, not for paying for luxury resorts. Juliet jumped up from the sofa, her eyes glistening with tears. So you're refusing to help me on the most important day of my life? We've already helped you a lot. We paid for the wedding, your dress, the reception. And the honeymoon isn't important, is it? You don't care about my happiness. Constance tried to intervene. Honey, calm down. Maybe we can work something out. We'll pay half and you can figure out the rest somehow. No, Juliet said sharply. Either you help us completely or you don't help us at all. Bradley already told the travel agent we'd confirmed the reservation. I could feel myself getting annoyed. Not so much because of the money, but because of how my daughter was presenting it, like an ultimatum. Juliet, $8,000 is too much, I said firmly. I refuse to pay it. My daughter's face contorted with anger. You refuse? So my happiness doesn't matter to you. You're willing to ruin my honeymoon over some money. It's not about the money itself. It's about spending wisely. Wisely? Juliet almost shouted. Dad, I'm getting married. This is the most important event of my life. And you think my happiness is an unreasonable expense. Constance tried to calm her daughter down, but she was already unable to listen. You know what, Dad? If you're not willing to help me at such an important time, then don't bother coming to the wedding. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I stood there looking at my daughter, unable to believe she could say such a thing. Juliet, Constance exclaimed, how can you say that? How can he refuse to help me? My daughter sobbed. $8,000 is nothing to him compared to my happiness. But he'd rather save money than make his daughter happy. I took a deep breath, trying to control my emotions. Juliet, you're going too far. No, you're going too far. From the very beginning, you were against Bradley, looking for flaws in him, and now you're trying to ruin our wedding. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I just think that $8,000 for a week's vacation is wasteful. A waste, Juliet repeated bitterly. So I don't deserve a nice honeymoon? So your daughter has to settle for cheap resorts? At that moment, Dexter entered the house. Hearing the shouting, he quickly made his way to the living room. What's going on here? He asked, looking at the upset faces. Your father refuses to pay for our honeymoon, Juliet sobbed, rushing to her brother. $8,000 is more important to him than my happiness. Dexter hugged his sister and looked at me questioningly. I briefly explained the situation. Juliet, calm down, Dexter said. $8,000 is a lot of money. You're against me too, she sobbed. I'm not against you, but maybe we can find a compromise. Look at other options for your honeymoon? No, Bradley already booked everything. He promised me the best vacation ever. Dexter scratched his chin thoughtfully. Listen, what if I borrow the money and give it to you? You can pay me back little by little. Juliet's eyes lit up with hope for a moment, but then she shook her head. No, Dex. If Dad doesn't want to help his daughter, then so be it. I'm not going to humiliate myself by asking my brother for money. Juliet, don't be silly, Dexter tried to reason with her. Dad already spent a lot of money on your wedding. But not on the most important thing, not on the thing that will make me truly happy. She turned to me, her eyes burning with determination. Dad, I'm asking you for the last time. Will you give me money for my honeymoon or not? I looked at my daughter, at her tear-stained face, at her stubborn chin. At that moment, she reminded me of myself as a child, throwing tantrums when I didn't get what I wanted. "No, Juliet, I won't give it to you." She wiped her tears with her sleeve and straightened up. "Then don't come to my wedding. I don't want to see you there." "Juliet, don't!" Constance tried to stop her. "I have to, Mom. If Dad isn't ready to support me on the most important day of my life, then he can't be there." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Dexter tried to stop her, but she pushed him away. "Juliet, think about what you're saying," her brother shouted after her. "I've thought it through," she shouted from the hallway, "and my decision is final." She slammed the door, started the car, and drove away, leaving the three of us in heavy silence. Constance cried, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. Dexter paced the room, shaking his head. "Dad, maybe we should have agreed," he said quietly. "For the sake of family harmony?" "Dex, it's not just about money. It's a matter of principle. If I give in now, there will be new demands, new ultimatums. But she's your daughter, and she's really getting married. That's exactly why she needs to understand the value of money, and her future husband needs to understand that too." Constance looked up at me with eyes red from crying. "Garrett, she's forbidden you to come to the wedding, your own daughter's wedding." "I heard. And what are you going to do?" I got up and headed for the living room door. "I'm going to the garage. I need to finish repairing the old Ford." The garage was quiet and peaceful. I turned on the radio, got out my tools, and immersed myself in my work. I needed to replace the oil filter and adjust the carburetor. Physical work always helped me think. An hour later, Constance came into the garage. Her face was tired but calm. "Garrett, we need to talk." I put down the wrench and turned to my wife. "I understand why you refuse to give them the money," she said. $8,000 a week is a lot, but your daughter has forbidden you from coming to the wedding. That's serious." "I know. Maybe we can compromise? Give her some of the money?" "Constance, it's not about the money. It's about them using us. First the reception, then the dress, now the honeymoon. What's next? A down payment on a house? A car for the son-in-law?" Constance sighed. "Maybe you're right. But what am I supposed to do? Not go to my own daughter's wedding?" "You'll go, I won't." "Garrett, if Juliet thinks she can give me ultimatums, she's going to learn that ultimatums have consequences." My wife looked at me with pain in her eyes. "You're seriously not going to your daughter's wedding?" I picked up the wrench and bent over the engine again. "Seriously, if she doesn't want to see me there, she won't." Constance stood there for a moment, then quietly left the garage. I was left alone with my 1970 Ford and my heavy thoughts. Inside, I was hurting from the argument with my daughter, but I wasn't going to back down. Too many years of working with people had taught me that concessions in situations like this only encourage new demands. There was a month left before the wedding, and I already knew that I would spend that day not in a restaurant, but somewhere far away from home. Maybe I'd go fishing with Chester. There, on the shore of the lake, with the sound of water and seagulls, it would be easier to get through this difficult day. June 23rd was hot and sunny. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, even though the alarm was set for 7. I didn't feel like sleeping. Thoughts were spinning in my head about the fact that today my daughter was getting married and I wouldn't be there. Over the past month, Juliet hadn't called or come to our house once. All communication was through Constance. My wife tried several times to get me to change my mind, but I was adamant. My daughter gave me an ultimatum, and now she has to live with the consequences. Constance got up even earlier than me. Hearing her moving around the house, I went down to the kitchen. My wife was standing at the stove, making breakfast, but it was clear that her mind was elsewhere. "Good morning," I said, sitting down at the table. "Good morning," she replied without turning around. "The coffee's ready." We ate breakfast in silence. Constance was wearing a dressing gown, but her hair was already neatly styled. She must have gotten up very early to get ready for the wedding. "What time does the ceremony start?" I asked. "At 4. Then it's straight to the reception at the restaurant. I see. Constance put down her fork and looked at me. Garrett, you can still change your mind. Juliet is your daughter, and today is the most important day of her life. Constance, we've discussed this 100 times. If my daughter doesn't want me at her wedding, I won't impose myself on her. She was upset. She said it in the heat of the moment. A month has passed. She could have called, apologized, tried to find a compromise, but she didn't. My wife sighed and began to clear the table. I understood how hard it was for her, but there was nothing I could do to change anything. Last night I made arrangements with Chester to go fishing. My old friend agreed to keep me company without asking any questions. He understood that I needed something to occupy my mind and take my mind off my troubles. At 8:30, I loaded my fishing gear into my pickup truck and drove to Chester's place. He was already waiting for me on the porch with a thermos of coffee and a bag of sandwiches. "Ready for a big catch?" he asked as he got into the car. "Ready for a long day in the fresh air," I replied. We drove to Lake Tarpon, 40 miles from the city. It's a quiet place with lots of fish, rarely visited by tourists, perfect for spending a day in contemplation. We drove in silence for the first half hour, listening to the radio. Then Chester turned off the music and spoke. "You know, Garrett, I've been thinking about your situation all night. And what did you come up with?" "That you did the right thing." I looked at my friend in surprise. A month ago, he advised me to trust my daughter. "You changed your mind?" "Yes, I've thought about it a lot, and I realized that it's not just about the money for the honeymoon. It's the way your daughter talks to you, the demands she makes." "Go on." "You know, I have a granddaughter who's 24. She's never once spoken to her grandfather in that tone, and she certainly never forbade him from attending important family events." Chester paused, looking out the window at the fields passing by. "And I talked to my wife. She worked with your Constance at the hospital and knows your family. She says that Juliet has always been spoiled and used to getting everything she wants. Maybe Constance and I really did spoil her too much." "No, you didn't. I'm sure you did. And now she thinks her parents are obligated to fulfill her every desire, even the most expensive ones." We arrived at the lake around 11. The place was deserted, just us and a few fishermen on the opposite shore. Chester helped me unload the fishing gear, and we found a comfortable spot under a large oak tree. The lake was as calm as a mirror. A light breeze rustled the leaves and seagulls cried somewhere in the distance. It was the perfect place to forget about problems and just enjoy nature. We cast our lines and settled into folding chairs. Chester took out a thermos and poured coffee into mugs. "You know what bothers me most about this story?" he said, sipping his coffee. "What?" "The groom's behavior. A normal man wouldn't let his fiancée argue with her parents over money. He would either earn the money for the honeymoon himself or choose something more affordable." I thought about that too, and this Bradley just stands there watching his future wife beg her father for money. He even encourages her to do it. Chester was right. In the entire month since our argument, Bradley hasn't once tried to contact me, offered a compromise, or apologized for the situation. He simply removed himself from the situation, leaving everything to Juliet. We fished for 2 hours in pleasant silence. The bite was good. We caught several perch and a pike. But the main thing was not the fish, but the fact that I could think calmly without being distracted by domestic problems. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I glanced at my watch. There were 2 hours left before the wedding. Somewhere, Constance was getting ready, putting on her best dress. Juliet was preparing to become a bride, and I was sitting on the shore of the lake with a fishing rod in my hands. "Do you regret it?" Chester asked, noticing my glance at my watch. "I don't know. On the one hand, it hurts to miss my daughter's wedding. On the other hand, I couldn't have done anything else. Garrett, mark my words. In a few months, you'll realize you did the right thing." At 4 o'clock, when the ceremony was supposed to begin at the church, I cast my line into the deepest part of the lake. I imagine Juliet walking down the aisle in her white dress, Bradley waiting for her in the suit we paid for. I imagine Constance sitting alone in the front row, explaining to her friends why I wasn't there. "Is it hard?" Chester asked quietly. "It's hard, but it's the right thing to do." We stayed at the lake until 6:30. The sun was setting and it was getting cooler. Chester suggested we go home. The reception must have been in full swing by then. On the way back, we stopped at a roadside cafe and had fried fish and potatoes for dinner. Chester told stories from his youth, and I listened half-heartedly. My thoughts were still at home, at the wedding I had missed. We arrived home at 9 o'clock. Constance's car wasn't there, she was still at the banquet. I thanked Chester for his company. He shook my hand and said, "Hang in there, Garrett, everything will work out." The house greeted me with silence. I went into the living room and turned on the TV, but I didn't feel like watching anything. I picked up a book, but couldn't concentrate on reading. My thoughts kept returning to the wedding. Constance arrived around 10:30. I heard the car pull into the driveway and met my wife at the door. She looked tired and upset. Her beautiful blue dress was wrinkled, her hair was disheveled, and her eyes were red. "How did it go?" I asked, helping her take off her shoes. "It was hard," she replied briefly. We went into the kitchen. Constance sat down at the table and I made her some tea. "Tell me about it," I asked. My wife sighed and began to tell me, "The ceremony went well. Juliet looked beautiful, but she was very nervous. She kept looking around, searching for you with her eyes. When she realized you weren't coming, she almost cried. My heart sank, but I said nothing." Bradley acted confident, smiling at the guests. After the ceremony, everyone went to a restaurant for the reception. How was it? Strange. Very strange. Bradley kept bragging about the gifts the newlyweds had received. He showed everyone the $1,000 check from your former colleague Thomas and talked about the expensive tableware from Juliet's neighbors. He acted as if it were all his doing. Constance took a sip of tea and continued. And Juliet sat there silently, nodding when spoken to, but you could see she was not herself. I saw her wipe away tears several times. Maybe she was just nervous. No, Garrett, those weren't tears of joy. She was upset because you weren't there, and she was angry at herself for treating you that way. My wife fell silent and stared into her teacup. "What else?" I asked. "Bradley's parents. They were a complete disaster. Roy had been drinking since the beginning of the banquet, and by the middle of the evening he could barely stand up. And Dorothy made a scene with the waiter because he allegedly didn't pour her enough wine." "Seriously?" "Absolutely. She yelled that they were paying for the banquet too, and were entitled to proper service, even though everyone knew they had only paid for the flowers." Constance shook her head. "Bradley tried to reason with them, but they wouldn't listen. In the end, they had to call a taxi and send his parents home. It was very awkward." "How was Dexter?" "Dexter sat there gloomy all evening, hardly saying a word. When I asked him what was wrong, he said, 'Mom, Dad was right. This marriage is a mistake.'" We were silent. Constance finished her tea and looked at me with tired eyes. "You know, the worst part wasn't even Bradley's parents' behavior. The worst part was how Bradley bragged about his money and gifts. He acted like he had married a rich girl and now had a right to all her family's resources." "Like what?" "He said several times in front of guests that he now had a reliable backup and that the Willis family would always help in difficult situations. He also bragged that his father-in-law had a lot of savings." I felt anger rising. So Bradley was already spending our money in his fantasies. "What did Juliet say?" She tried to change the subject. It was obvious she was uncomfortable, but Bradley wouldn't let it go. Constance got up from the table and started pacing around the kitchen. "Garrett, I'm starting to realize that you were right all along. This man didn't marry our daughter, he married our money. It's a shame you didn't realize that sooner." "Yes, it is. But now there's nothing we can do about it. Juliet is married and all we can do is watch. We talked a little more, then went to bed. Lying in bed, I thought about the day that had passed. It hurt to miss my daughter's wedding, but I had no choice. Juliet gave me an ultimatum, and I accepted it. Constance's story only strengthened my conviction that I had made the right decision. Bradley already considered our money his. His parents behaved inappropriately, and my daughter clearly regretted her words, but her pride prevented her from admitting her mistake. I wonder how long it will take before this marriage shows its true colors. Chester said a few months. I'm afraid he's right. The 3 months passed slowly and painfully. After the wedding, a strange atmosphere settled in our house, as if someone in the family had died, but everyone was pretending that nothing had happened. Constance tried to maintain the usual order of life, but it was clear how much the break with her daughter was weighing on her. Juliet didn't call, didn't visit, didn't answer her mother's calls. Occasionally, Constance received short messages from her. Everything's fine. Don't worry. I'll call later. But later didn't come for weeks. Dexter tried to contact his sister several times, but she was cold to him too. She said she was happy, that her husband was wonderful, that they were building a new life. I missed my daughter more than I was willing to admit. I had grown accustomed to her unexpected visits, to the way she would burst into the house with news and plans. The house felt empty without her laughter and arguments. But pride prevented me from taking the first step. Juliet had given me an ultimatum, forbidding me from attending the wedding, and now I had to find a way to reconcile on my own. Constance was suffering openly. She often sat by the phone, staring at it hopefully. Several times I found her crying in the kitchen or in the living room. When I tried to comfort her, she replied that everything was fine. She was just tired. Maybe you should call her? My wife asked from time to time. No, Constance. She's a grown woman. She has to decide for herself if she needs her parents. But inside, I was burning with the desire to hear my daughter's voice, to find out how she was doing, if everything was all right with her. Dexter came to visit us every weekend, as usual, but we hardly mentioned Juliet. My son could see how hard it was for his mother and didn't want to make things worse. Once he mentioned that he had tried to meet his sister at her work, but the secretary said that Juliet didn't want to see anyone. She's avoiding all of us, Dexter said. She's even stopped seeing her friends. She's living in a cocoon. That alarmed me. Juliet had always been sociable, loved company, and enjoyed meeting friends. If she had shut herself off from everyone, something was wrong. We heard bits and pieces from neighbors and acquaintances. Mrs. Johnson told Constance that she had seen Juliet at the supermarket and that she looked pale and tired. Another neighbor mentioned that she had met her at a gas station, and Juliet barely said hello before leaving. Something's wrong with her, Constance said. I can feel it in my mother's heart. I felt it too, but what could I do? My daughter had chosen to isolate herself. In August, our sprinkler system broke down. We had to call a repairman. It turned out that the guy who came to fix it worked for the same insurance company as Juliet, just in a different department. Mrs. Coleman? He asked when Constance mentioned her daughter's name. Yes, of course. I know her. She works in the auto insurance department. She's a nice girl, but she's been a little sad lately. She used to always smile and say hello to her co-workers, but now she's mostly quiet. This information convinced me that my daughter was having problems, but she still wasn't giving any signs or asking for help. In early September, something happened that made me seriously think. I went to a car repair shop to change the oil in my car. The mechanic, a guy about 35, turned out to be talkative. Recently, a guy came here selling a BMW, he said, working under the hood. He said he needed the money urgently. The car was in good condition, but he agreed to sell it for less than market value. Did you buy it? No, we didn't have that kind of money, but I remember the guy. He was tall and wore a gold chain. He said he worked at a car dealership but was selling the car privately. My heart skipped a beat. The description matched Bradley. How long ago was that? 3 weeks ago, maybe a little more. I didn't ask any more questions, but my mind was racing. Why would Bradley sell his BMW? Could he really be in such serious financial trouble? That evening, I told Constance about it. My wife was immediately concerned. What if they really are in trouble? Maybe we should call Juliet? If they have problems, she'll ask for help herself. But I was worried. Selling a car that you've taken out a loan for usually means serious financial difficulties. Another 2 weeks passed. One Wednesday evening, while Constance and I were watching TV, a car pulled up in the driveway. I looked out the window and saw Juliet's old Honda. My heart leaped into my throat. "Constance, it's Juliet," I said. My wife jumped up from the sofa and rushed to the window. We watched as our daughter slowly walked toward the house. Even in the darkness, we could see that she was slouching, her head bowed. Juliet didn't ring the doorbell. She took out her old key. We heard the front door open, then footsteps in the hallway. "Mom? Dad?" she called in an uncertain voice. "We're here, sweetheart," Constance replied. Juliet appeared in the living room doorway, and I caught my breath. She had lost weight, looked haggard, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She was wearing old jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, not at all like the girl who usually took such care with her appearance. "Juliet, what happened?" Constance exclaimed, rushing to her daughter. She collapsed into her mother's arms and burst into tears. She cried for a long time, sobbing uncontrollably, like children do after a serious trauma. Constance stroked her head and whispered soothing words. I stood nearby, not knowing what to do. Finally, Juliet calmed down a little and wiped her face with her sleeve. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. I was such a fool." "Hush, sweetheart, it's all right," Constance reassured her. "Sit down and tell us what happened." We settled down in the living room. Juliet sat on the sofa between us, still sobbing. It was clear that she didn't know where to start. "Bradley left," she finally blurted out. "Left how?" Constance didn't understand. "He left me. He disappeared. He took everything he could and ran away." Juliet started crying again, but now she began to tell the story through her tears. "He's been acting strange for the last few weeks. He started staying late at work, answering calls in another room, hiding his phone. I thought he was planning a surprise for our 3-month wedding anniversary." She fell silent, gathering her strength. "Then 3 days ago, I came home from work and the apartment was empty. He took all his things, all the appliances we bought after the wedding. He took my jewelry, even the engagement ring he gave me." "The engagement ring?" Constance gasped. "Yes. I took it off before showering, put it on the nightstand, and forgot about it. He took it too." Juliet wiped her nose with a handkerchief her mother had given her. "But that's not all. He emptied our joint account. It had the money we got for the wedding, plus what I had saved from my salary. Almost $6,000. I felt the blood rush to my face. So this bastard not only abandoned his wife, but he robbed her too. And somehow he got access to my personal account," my daughter continued. "There was another $3,000 in there. It's all gone." "How did he get access to your personal account?" I asked. "I don't know. Maybe he saw my PIN when I paid with my card, or he found my online banking password written down somewhere." Constance stroked her daughter's hand, trying to calm her down. "Sweetie, where is Bradley now? Have you tried to contact him?" "His phone is off. His boss said he quit 2 weeks ago without giving any explanation. He just stopped coming in." Juliet burst into tears again. "I'm such an idiot. For 3 months I defended him and argued with you about him, and he just used me." "Don't say that," I tried to comfort her. "You couldn't have known what he was like." "Yes, I could. You tried to explain it to me. Especially you, Dad. But I didn't want to listen. I thought you just didn't want to let me go." She turned to me, her eyes full of remorse. "Dad, I'm sorry. I said such horrible things to you. I forbade you from coming to my wedding. How can you even talk to me after all this? My heart ached with pain. My little girl was suffering, and all my resentment vanished in an instant. Juliet, you're my daughter. I love you no matter what. But I was so cruel to you. You were in love and protecting someone you thought was good. I understand. Juliet threw her arms around my neck and hugged me tightly. Daddy, I missed you so much. I'm so sorry we fought. I hugged my daughter and felt her trembling from tears and exhaustion. I missed you too, sweetheart. I missed you so much. We sat there for several minutes, just hugging. Constance cried quietly with happiness. Finally, the family was together again. What do the neighbors say? My wife asked. Maybe someone saw him leave? Mrs. Parker from next door said she saw him the day before yesterday morning, Juliet replied. He was carrying boxes out and loading them into his car. There was a young woman with him, about 22 or 23 years old. A young woman? Yes. Blonde, pretty. Mrs. Parker thought she was his sister or cousin. But Bradley's sister is in college and she's a brunette, so he had another woman. Everything was falling into place. The strange behavior over the last few weeks, the secret phone calls, the frequent absences. Daughter, have you contacted the police? I asked. He essentially stole your money. I have, but they said that since we had a joint account, it's not technically theft. As for my personal account, I'll have to prove that he gained access illegally. And what? The police aren't going to do anything? They opened a case, but they said there's little chance of finding him. There are many cases like this, and people usually disappear for a long time. Juliet wiped her eyes and tried to pull herself together. I'm practically broke. Rent, car payments, insurance. None of that goes away. And my salary is only enough to cover the bare necessities. Don't worry about it, sweetheart, said Constance. We'll help you. Mom, I can't ask you for money after everything I've done. Don't be silly, I stopped her. You're our daughter, and we'll always help you when you really need it. Those words sounded symbolic. When my daughter asked for money for a luxurious honeymoon, I refused. But when she really found herself in trouble, I was ready to do anything to help her. Maybe you should move in with us for a while, Constance suggested, until you get your finances sorted out. Juliet shook her head. No, Mom. I'm an adult. I have to manage on my own. I just wanted to know that you forgave me, that I have a family. You always have a family, I said, no matter what. We talked late into the night. Juliet told me the details of her life with Bradley, and the picture grew increasingly bleak. He constantly hinted at our family savings and made plans for how they could be put to good use. He said I was too conservative with money, that it should be put to work. He kept saying that your father was sitting on a pile of gold, my daughter said. He said that once we got closer to the family, we could convince you to invest in his business. So I wasn't wrong about him after all. Bradley didn't marry your daughter, he married our money. Did you have a honeymoon in the Bahamas? Constance asked. Juliet laughed bitterly. What honeymoon? We spent 3 days in a cheap motel in Orlando. Bradley said the reservation in the Bahamas was canceled for technical reasons, but that we'd get the money back later. Then it turned out there was no reservation at all. That was the last straw. Not only did the bastard deceive his daughter from the very beginning, but he also used the honeymoon story to turn her against her family. Around midnight, I went to the kitchen to make some tea. I wanted to do something simple and familiar to calm down. While the water was boiling, I thought about how quickly my daughter's life had fallen apart. 3 months ago, she was a happy bride, dreaming of a wonderful future. And now she was sitting in our living room, robbed and abandoned. When I returned with the tea, Juliet and Constance were sitting together, hugging each other. My daughter looked a little calmer, but the exhaustion was evident in her every movement. Dad, she said quietly as I set the tray on the table, I know I have no right to ask, but could you lend me some money to tide me over? I'll pay you back every penny as soon as I can. Juliet, don't worry about paying me back. We're a family, and families help each other in difficult times. But No buts. Tomorrow we'll go to the bank and transfer as much as you need to get back on your feet. My daughter started crying again, but now they were tears of gratitude and relief. I don't deserve parents like you, she whispered. You do, I said firmly. We all make mistakes. The important thing is to be able to admit them and correct them. Juliet left for home around 1 in the morning. She promised to come back on the weekend and said she wouldn't hide from her family anymore. Constance and I walked her to her car and stood on the porch for a long time, watching the red lights fade into the night. She's been through a lot, my wife said. Yes, but now she's wiser and stronger. Do you think she'll be okay? She will be. She has a strong character and a family that will support her. We returned to the house and began clearing away the cups and napkins. The usual household chores seemed soothing after such an emotional evening. Garrett, Constance said, loading the dishes into the sink, you were right all along. I should have listened to you. It's not about who was right. It's about our daughter coming back to us. But if we had given her money for her honeymoon, if you had gone to the wedding, nothing would have changed. Bradley would have robbed her and run away anyway. Our daughter would have lost another $8,000 of our money. Constance nodded, drying her hands with a towel. You know what struck me most about her story? What? How she realized her mistake. Many people spend their whole lives unable to admit they were wrong, and she came and apologized. She has good parents, I smiled, and a good father who didn't let her do anything stupid with the money. We went to bed late, but I couldn't fall asleep for a long time. The events of the evening replayed in my head, my daughter's words, her tears, and her remorse. It hurt to see her suffer, but at the same time, I felt relieved. Finally, the family was together again. At last, my daughter understood that her parents only wanted what was best for her. In the morning, I woke up with a clear understanding of what needed to be done. Juliet would need not only financial help, but also moral support. She was facing divorce, dealing with banks, and looking for a new place to live. All this time, we had to be there for her, to show her that she was not alone. I also thought about how Chester had been right. He said that in a few months I would realize that I had done the right thing. 3 months had passed, and I truly understood. If I had given in then, given her the money for the honeymoon, gone to the wedding, it would have been much harder for Juliet to admit her mistake now. She would have felt obligated to defend a husband who ultimately abandoned her. But this way, she realized that her parents loved her not for anything she did, but simply because she was her, and that sometimes refusing to help is also a way of helping.